This is a Film Stories original podcast.
When it comes to weight loss, no two people are the same. That's why Noom builds personalized plans based on your unique psychology and biology. Take Brittany. After years of unsustainable diets, Noom helped her lose 20 pounds and keep it off.
I was definitely in a yo-yo cycle for years of just losing weight, gaining weight, and it was exhausting.
And Stephanie. She's a former D1 athlete who knew she couldn't out-train her diet, and she lost 38 pounds.
My relationship to food before Noom was never consistent.
And Evan, he can't stand salads, but he still lost 50 pounds with Noom.
I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. Even through the pickiness, Noom taught me that building better habits builds a healthier lifestyle. I'm not doing this to get to a number. I'm doing this to feel better.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom users compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
We made this.
Welcome everyone to the Xcast. The truth is in here. This is our special Fight the Future Minute podcast, and I'm Tony Black, and you are listening to our coverage of Minute 12 of the X-Files Fight the Future. This minute begins at 11 minutes on the dot as a helicopter travels through the skies of Dallas in Texas and ends on 11 minutes 59 seconds with Special Agent in Charge Darius Michaud looking at Scully on a roof from a distance, enigmatically. And to discuss this minute, I'm joined by an all-new guest on Fight the Future Minute in one of our fantastic Xcast patrons, Cortlan Waters Bartley. Hi, Cortlan. It's great to have you join us for this massive project.
Yes. Hi, Tony. I'm excited. I'm ready to talk about every minute of Fight the Future.
Yeah. Whatever minutes are thrown at you,
yes.
Yeah, you're going to do this.
Any minute. That's fine.
But yeah, it's because it's an ambitious project. Obviously, I'm back as host now after you've had a little bit of a break from me over the last few minutes. But it's going well so far, hopefully. And so when we get a new guest on, Cortlan, the standard thing is to, like we do for the episodes, I suppose, is to ask what you think about the film in general. When you first watched Fight the Future and what your first sort of introduction was to it and what you would give it out of 10. So take it away. What are your answers there?
Well, I think I've mentioned on a round table or somewhere before on the podcast, I didn't start watching the show until it was on Netflix. So I think I was trying to figure out when exactly I watched Fight the Future, because I watched them all in order. And I think it had to have been sometime in 2015. So that's when I really was like binging the show. So I think, yeah, somewhere in there I watched it. So I watched it streaming first.
I think you might be that. I don't know if we'll get anyone who watched it like that late. You see what I mean? Like, I think a lot of the answers in this podcast are going to be around the time or a little bit afterwards, or things like that. So only a few years ago. Yeah. So what did you, from this distance then, from this vantage point of like nearly 20 years, what did you think of the film?
Yeah, well, and I very rarely regret like that I didn't watch the show as it was airing. I mean, I'm sad, of course, it would have been great, but I was a child and ill prepared to handle the X-Files. So but having missed the experience of watching Fight the Future in like a movie theater is a thing that I think that I would say I regret. Like, I missed that like moment where the theme song like is on the big screen, in the theater.
Yeah.
But I think honestly, I think this movie holds up really well. I loved it the first time that I saw it streaming, and I own it in a variety of ways now. Digitally and on DVD too. Yeah, because I really liked it. I think it looks good. I think that it flows really well. I think it's a good movie, even fandom aside.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because it's interesting from, a lot of time has passed since 1998 when it first came out, and for somebody to watch it in 2015, we might have had a different appreciation of it back then than you might, but what would you give it out of 10? Do you think it still holds up high, or would you say it's not as good? What do you think?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think like 9, maybe 10. Like when I think about ways that I could introduce a new person to the X-Files, I think that the movie might be a really great way to get into it without having to invest tons of time. Like this is a huge, long show. And I think if you just walked in and saw the movie, you would be able to decide, yes, I like this, or no, I do not.
I think that's an underrated viewpoint there about the movie being an entry point, because so many people over the years talk about how the film, because it's a rare beast in that it's a mythology movie, it's like a mythology story, one of the biggest mythology stories that sort of bridges 2 seasons of the show. That's very rare, and it hasn't really been done very often since. It's a lot of time people say, you need to know 5 years worth of mythology beforehand and that kind of thing. I agree with you. I don't necessarily think you do.
Yeah, I think so. I think you might not understand everything that you saw immediately if you had never seen any of it. But I think that you would understand enough to follow the story and decide whether or not you were invested in Mulder and Scully, which I think is the important part of watching the X-Files. So, I think it would be a totally fine place to start.
I think I need to test this on my wife, because my wife has only watched about a season and a little bit of the show, and she just the other day, in fact, we were talking to some mutual friends who came to our house, and they were asking me about my podcasting and things, and they were going, "Oh, well, we loved the X-Files when we were kids," and I said, "Well, my wife can't, she's got a little bit of the way in, and she says it's old-fashioned and it's it's dated." And I don't agree with that. And
Sure.
I've said to her, "You're wrong," but she watches a lot of TV. I respect her opinion. She's very good with a lot of stuff, but I don't think she's kind of seen the show at its best necessarily. So I should really throw the movie on and say, right, just watch this. You know what the setup is. You know what the general idea is. See what you think. In fact, I'm going to do this. Okay, this is on the podcast. I'm putting this gauntlet down now, right? I am doing this. I'm going to get her to watch Fight the Future and see what she says. Because that's a good example of what you're saying. Somebody who doesn't really know much of the context, doesn't know anything about the mythology, can sit down and go, is this enjoyable on its own merits?
Yes, yeah. And it is a good way, especially if you're a person who gets hung up on the sort of dated 1993 like cell phones and blazers and stuff like that. If you're a person that you're just like, I can't watch this, I think Fight the Future doesn't have any of that kind of problem necessarily. So
I agree. So I'll report back. Maybe not during this podcast.
Sure.
Over the course of the Fight the Future minutes, but at some point while we're doing the Xcast, I'll report back on what Mrs. Black thinks of Fight the Future. Anyway, let's talk about the movie then. So this is the 11th minute of the film, and this is the first cut now to the section of the movie we will be introduced ultimately to Mulder and Scully, who will come into the narrative soon. And we're in Dallas at the federal buildings in Dallas as we see this helicopter deposit our new, fairly major character of this start of the movie, Darius Michaud. And this was obviously rarely in TV and movies are these things filmed in the place they're supposed to be. The X-Files filmed everything in Vancouver when they were all over the shop. But in this case, they're filming this in downtown LA in a building that they were one of the first crews to use the building that they were filming in because it was previously abandoned. And I don't know how familiar you are with LA or Dallas, Cortlan, and whether or not the authenticity's there or anything like that.
Well, not at all. I live nowhere close to either LA or Dallas. I've been to Texas, but not to Dallas. I've been to California, but not to LA. So, not at all. I could not tell you whether or not those skylines are accurate, but that's okay.
Remarkably, I have been to both. So, even though I'm in England, I have been. There is a story I should tell really at some point about how I was in America and then I got trapped by the Icelandic volcano that went off in 2010.
Okay.
And I was supposed to leave Oklahoma after 2 weeks, and I got trapped in America for another week because the planes couldn't fly because of the ash over the Atlantic Ocean. So I ended up staying in Dallas, and I wasn't part of the trip or anything like that. So it was. I've said before, yeah, I got trapped in inverted commas. Right. I had a terrible time.
Trapped.
Oh, what a shame. Yeah. And then during that same holiday, I was in LA at one point, and we were doing a bit of a road trip and stuff. So I can kind of vouch for this. They do look quite similar from what I remember. It was a long time ago. But yeah, I suppose big cities, that's the idea that putting them on. And that was the trick with Vancouver, wasn't it? They got away with so much even though they were in Canada.
Right,
so,
right. Well, yeah, I think, it's a big city. There are lots of, like the buildings and all of that. There's a bright blue sky, and it's obviously sunny.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
I think we can.
Yeah. You can get away with it, can't you? So, yeah, anyway, this helicopter deposits Michaud, played by Terry O'Quinn, who is an actor. I must have said this before in the X-Cast, but he's my favourite actor, Terry O'Quinn, of all time. My favourite movie actor is Sean Connery, but Terry O'Quinn is my favourite actor of all time. Are you particularly familiar with him?
Well, I have. Okay, so this is where being a fan that sort of entered into the X-Files late does come into play. Because in my notes for minute 12 here, I have written John Locke gets off a helicopter. That's
absolutely.
That's just what I think when I see it. That's like my immediate thought is John Locke with a mustache gets off a helicopter. And so, but that's my immediate with Terry. Anytime I see Terry O'Quinn, I just immediately think about Lost. Not because he's not a good actor, being in other things, just because that's what my brain does.
No, totally. And so many people would. I mean, I do to an extent, but I was, it sounds really smug when I say, I was a fan of Terry O'Quinn before Lost, but I don't mean it like that. It was, I remember in the 90s, it was primarily his role on Millennium, which is the X-Files spin-off, sort of semi-spin-off, where he played a similar kind of character. He was like a former assistant director of the FBI turned investigator called Peter Watts. And obviously we've got the Millennium podcast, The Time Is Now, on the We Made This network. So I'm sure quite a few people listening to this have probably listened to us talking about Terry O'Quinn on there. But he was so good, and he became essentially a regular in the second series of Millennium, which is a fantastic season of television. And he was so good in this very... He always... That was the thing with Lost. He always played intense characters, didn't he? Like Michaud, people who come in and they're very, driven. And then... The great thing about Lost is, do you remember the episode Walkabout where you find out that John Locke's in a wheelchair?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
That episode starts with the flashback of him in his office, and it looks like he's playing another character like this. Like he picks up the phone and he's like, yeah, this is General, and you think, oh yeah, this is Terry O'Quinn playing another hard-ass sort of general. He was a military guy. And then you find out he works for a box company.
Yeah, and it's like a game or something, right? They're like playing some kind of like role-playing game.
Yeah, it's like LARPing, isn't it? Yeah. Kind of thing. And I thought that was so clever because Lost kind of subverted Terry O'Quinn and the kind of characters he played, didn't it? John Locke was this broken, sad man, basically. So yeah, Michaud is exactly the kind of template that Terry O'Quinn, but at this point, was known for, like in the late 90s.
Yeah, he's definitely in charge when he gets there. They're obviously waiting for him to tell them what to do.
Were you a big Lost fan then, Cortlan?
I was. It's another thing that I did not watch when it was airing. I am really bad at watching TV as it airs, apparently. But I binge watched the whole thing with a good friend of mine several times, as I do. Once I like something, I tend to watch it over and over again. So
watch it again.
Big Lost fan. I liked it a lot, and he was
Me
great.
too.
He was really good in Lost.
Oh, he was fantastic. Like he was the standout. Well, he really became sort of the iconic character in that show, didn't he?
Yeah,
John Locke.
Definitely.
And that's why
he's the central part.
Yeah, he is. He's the heart of the show, really, and that's why Terry O'Quinn became such a well-known actor off the back of Lost, because he sort of reignited his career, I think, really after that. But he's always one of those people that crops up in all kinds of different things. And even you see him in like The West Wing, where he plays like a general again, and it's like, oh yeah, Terry O'Quinn as a general. Or you see him
of course he is.
Of course he is. Or in Harsh Realm, which was the intended fourth Chris Carter-led show, which only got a few episodes, which Darren Mooney and I have done a podcast on, which will be coming out around the time the 7th season of the Xcast airs, because we're doing it sort of in tandem with that, which patrons will have heard, or some patrons will have heard already. Where Terry O'Quinn played the bad guy, he was like it was like a take on the Matrix. It was a bit like the Matrix, and he plays like this general in sort of a Matrix kind of scenario. But he's really good in that as well. Again, playing that very stern kind of character. So have you ever seen that, Cortlan, Harsh Realms? It's a strange
I
one.
haven't seen Millennium or Harsh Realm. So as soon as I have a good way to access them, I will.
That's the thing. They're not on streaming,
No.
which is so annoying, you know? Especially Harsh Realm, because that was one of those classics that are cancelled shows that very few people saw, unless you were a proper Chris Carter sort of nerd like me. So, yeah. But, yeah, Terry O'Quinn, just great in whatever he is. And in this, like, because obviously Michaud, we know that Michaud knows about the bomb. And he knows he's sort of in on it all. So he's like here trying to be like keep them all busy, isn't he? In the wrong building, you know? Which, you know, sending the guy through again with the dogs. And you just see the guy's face, don't you?
Really?
Like, oh,
Yeah. Like what? How?
Again?
Would they have missed something? Like, I don't. Is that how dogs work? I don't think so.
It sort of ends, doesn't it, with him looking at the Scully over. Well, we don't know it's Scully yet, but a figure on the opposite building where the actual bomb is.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's such a good setup too, because I think at this point, like if you're watching it for the first time, you don't really know that he already knows, but you kind of, so maybe he's looking at Scully or whoever the mystery person on the other roof who is Scully. You know, maybe he's looking like, oh man, like I'm going to have to wrangle all these people into doing their jobs.
Yeah.
But really, he's thinking a lot of other slightly more sinister things.
But that's it. You're right, aren't you? Because we don't know at this point that he is in on it at all. It's just he just seems like a really sort of hard ass boss who's making all his guys do more work. But there's something in that look. Terry O'Quinn, he doesn't look happy that he's seen whoever it is on the other side of the roof. So
Definitely not.
There's something interesting in the way he looks. And as it turns out, that figure, or Scully, on the staircase, there was no staircase. And that was CGI'd in by
Crucial.
Matt Beck, the visual effects guy, in order to show her walking down. I don't know why they went to that effort. Why couldn't they just had her standing there,
Like,
or like
on
walking on the
regular
edge?
part of the roof. Yeah, I don't know.
What's the point of the staircase, really? I don't know.
know.
Of all the things to like concentrate on, like CGI wise, we need a staircase there, don't we?
It seems like there are other places in the movie where they probably needed that CGI.
Yeah, right? Strange choice. Anyway, so it finishes with Michaud looking out at Scully, and that's where we'll finish this minute, and we'll carry on. So that wraps up this latest Fight the Future minute. Thanks for listening, everybody. Cortlan, you're going to be back for minute 13 to discuss the first appearance of Scully and sort of Mulder as well. So until our next minute, guys, thanks for listening again, and remember, as always, trust no one. Previously on the We Made This Network. The muscles from Brussels.
Very difficult times thanks to Bruce Lee, who makes a
or
literal
a brain
appearance.
aneurysm.
That
which
is
we're not
debatable,
really
yes.
sure.
Yeah, well, like, is he hallucinating? Is he actually seeing Bruce Lee? I don't know.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yes, we will get to it. Okay.
Don't say the C word.
And I think Birdemic, it's so bad. I've seen like student films on like training on courses and examples and rough cuts that are just simply much, much better than what Birdemic presents you with.
Yeah, the students have more budget than they did apparently.
I swear those birds are animated GIFs.
And in addition to that, you can tell that they're copied and pasted.
Yeah. For anyone who hasn't seen Birdemic, it is basically a shit version of Hitchcock's The Birds, with less plot, less tenseness. It's just shite, but because it's shite, it's entertaining.
The Movie Palace.
On a more kind of abstract point, I guess, I mean, just personally speaking, how important do you think films are to us, I mean, us personally or people generally, at a time like this? Very important, I'd say. What do you think?
So I think films, and classic films especially, offer two things in particular. It offers us a way to escape from our reality, and for us, and the opposite side of that, it allows us to process our emotions.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.